Hey everyone, it's Jennifer Mardoff here. I'm Engaged What Now, your founder and one of your admins. It is Wedding Wednesday Live, and we have a very special guest tonight. We have Sarah White, who is a true professional. She has so much knowledge and so much expertise to share with all of you that you are in for a real treat. And definitely, she is giving of her time, which is amazing. We want to thank her for doing that and her expertise. You guys are getting a lot of value tonight, that is for sure. So get your questions ready for Sarah. She is here to hopefully help you de-stress a little bit and actually enjoy your wedding planning process and make your day extra special. She actually has a very unique take on wedding planning. It is a virtual wedding planning event service that she offers, which is the first of its kind that I've heard of. So I'm really curious to see how she got started and to learn more about it, because in this day and age where everyone is using Skype and kind of very techie and remote access to everything, it sure is helpful to have an event planner at your fingertips at a strike of a keyboard. So I'm going to turn it over to her. I'm really excited to hear all about how she got into the business as well, and a little bit more about how all her services kind of can help all of you ladies in our group. And she will, at the end of the broadcast, will put up all her contact information because I think she could be a really valuable resource for a lot of you. And you'll probably want to contact her. So we'll make sure that at the end of the broadcast, we put all that information up. And this broadcast will be posted in the group. So if anyone misses it or wants to replay it, it'll be available to you. So I'm going to throw it over to Sarah, and she's going to get started. And again, if you guys have any questions about planning your own wedding, about where to start, if you're stuck on a little detail you're hung up on, ask away, and Sarah is here for you guys. So thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Jennifer. So that was a great introduction. And like Jennifer said, I do specialize in a type of planning called virtual planning. So not super common yet, which is a good thing and a bad thing, but I'll tell you a little bit about my background and how I came to virtual planning, and then also tell you a little bit about what virtual planning is to start. So I have always sort of known that I wanted to be in weddings specifically, but also special events and on the planning side. So I did my internships in college in special events and event planning and got my feet wet there. And then following graduation, I took another internship because the job market was not great when I graduated. So I took another internship. And then a couple months later, got my first lead sort of in the event industry, which was working for a catering company. So I figured any job in the industry is better than no job in the industry. So I started working for a catering company where I quickly escalated to become their catering and events manager. And from there, my knowledge expanded. So that actually was a blessing in disguise and gave me a great base of knowledge for weddings and special events. And also diversified my knowledge from not just the planning side, but also how caterers view things. From there, I started taking on weddings as a planner and a coordinator, and then also started managing venues as well. So I've got a great breadth of knowledge, like Jennifer said, from very different perspectives. So not just from the planner's perspective, but also from the caterer's perspective and the venue manager's perspective. And I have been in this industry now, I believe, it's 2018. So 7 years this year I've been in this industry. And the way I came to virtual planning was that I started to notice a couple years ago a sort of big gap in the market where if you didn't have the budget to hire a full service planner, there was really no option for you to get personalized professional help other than a coordinator. And depending on where you are in the planning process, you may or may not know this yet, but your coordinator is really not involved in the months leading up to your wedding. They really sort of take over at the 4 to 6 week mark. And, you're sort of flying on your own in all of the months leading up to that. So what I would know.
Yep. So I think that's a really great point. I just want to stop you for a second because I think that's a really great point, because I know myself when I was planning my wedding, tell us the difference between an event coordinator and an event planner. Or an
Absolutely. It's a great question because there's a huge difference. So when you're talking about a coordinator, the term I should start gets used interchangeably a lot. And they are in fact two very, very different things. So a planner is someone who is handling the logistics of your planning from the time you get engaged to the send off at your reception. So this person is there, they're attending every meeting for you, they are finding vendors on your behalf, they're heavily involved in the decision-making process with you, and are really doing a lot of the legwork for you. So if you are a very busy person, if you've got a lot going on, a planner is a great asset. However, planners are also really expensive because the thing you have to consider with a planner, especially a full service planner, is it takes about 600 to 800 hours to plan a wedding from start to finish. So that person's giving you 600 to 800 hours of their time. So when you break down their fee based on that hourly rate, you're actually getting a heck of a deal. However, for most people, it's a really large sum of money and a pretty big percentage of their wedding budget when you look at that overall fee. So a coordinator is someone who takes over in the last 4 to 6 weeks, and it varies based on the coordinator and the package. You generally get the same services. It's just a matter of their preference of when they take over. So that person just sort of comes in at the end. They become the point of contact for all of your vendors. Once they're booked, once all of the decisions are made, they just sort of dot the I's and cross the T's.
So they're not really doing a lot of legwork then. You're still doing a lot of the legwork.
Yeah. So when you hire a coordinator, you're doing all of the legwork yourself, except for that last month. And that's when your coordinator sort of make sure that the vendor has everything that they need to execute the contract. They make your timeline, your schematic generally, do a site visit with you, handle the setup of any items that you provide, oversee vendor contracts, make sure they're fulfilling their contracts on the day of your wedding, and then also pick up that night. Make sure that the venue requirements are met for cleanup. Make sure all of the items get returned to the appropriate party, that vendors show up and pick up their items, that nothing essentially is going wrong. They oversee the timeline, handle any conflicts, those types of things. So a coordinator puts in, I would say generally it varies per wedding, but generally between 20 and 30 hours in that last month before your wedding, whereas a full service planner is putting in, again, depending on the wedding, somewhere between 600 and 800 hours over the entirety of your engagement. So there's a huge difference in terms of number of hours of commitment, the things that they do, which is why you see that drastic price difference between the two services.
Okay, and I'm just curious because we do have some viewers. If anyone here is using an event coordinator or an event planner, give me a thumbs up or a smiley face or something. I'm just curious because we have some people that hopped on. If anyone here is actually using one and which one they're using.
I would always recommend to anybody hiring a coordinator, regardless of your budget. I mean, if you can fit it in there, it's definitely something to prioritize because it relieves so much stress the day of your wedding, not having to worry about the setup, not having to worry about if vendors are showing up on time.
Great tip. That's a great tip to kind of work that into your budget if you that's one thing that's maybe a non-negotiable.
Yeah. And again, maybe I'm a little bit biased, but in my opinion, it definitely is. I think everyone I've ever talked to has never regretted hiring a coordinator. But I've talked to people after they've gotten married and said that's the one thing that they wish they would have prioritized a little bit more. And the thing about coordinators too is with the nature of what we do, there's a lot of people who offer the service. So you can generally find someone who can offer this service for you within your price point, whatever that might be. And I will always suggest too that it's a third party, that it's not a friend or a family member, because oftentimes they get excited about your day and want to celebrate with you. So may get distracted visiting with other family members or other friends, or enjoying the day with you and celebrating with you.
Yes.
And so things may fall through the cracks. So I always suggest, if your budget permits, to have that coordinator be a third party, someone that you've hired specifically for this job.
Great tip. Is that one of the, I'm curious to hear about some of the top kind of stress triggers that you get on your website, and that with ladies contacting you saying, you know, what their top triggers are for stress, and if they even think about, I think that's a great tip, that they even think about, you know, something, you know, on the day of, like, are they going to have everything they need, and who's going to be there, and are they going to be relying on their bridesmaids when, you know, the bridesmaids are excited to be there and be part of their day and want to enjoy it as well. And so if you want to kind of touch upon those, I put a couple of questions in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, going back, I think you made an interesting point with the bridesmaids. A lot of people, I hear that a lot, where it's a pretty, I don't want to say objection, but it's something that I hear quite frequently when someone's talking about hiring a coordinator. They'll say, oh, well, you know, I've got my bridesmaids and that's why they're there, and they're there to help with the setup. The day of your wedding, when they're also having to get ready, so their focus is also on getting their hair done, getting their makeup done, enjoying the day with you. And I mean, let's be honest, Jennifer, you're married. I'm married too, as well as I've been doing this for 7 years. The day of the wedding, your bridesmaids just want to celebrate with you. The champagne is open at 9 a.m. And by 11:30, no one's really productive in terms of the getting things done and handling conflict department. So
no, I am so glad that we had a full service caterer that, you know, that was great at, you know, the setup, the decorating, because I could not see us doing that at all. So that definitely is a good point. And, you know, they are there to enjoy, and they've been a part of your life probably for, you know, I know in my case, my matron of honor was my good friend since kindergarten. So, you know, I think she was just there to be, you know, part of my special day. And that's what I wanted her. I wanted her to enjoy it too. And, you know, just to be by my side and not be running around, you know, like a chicken with her head cut off.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because that doesn't make it an enjoyable day for them either. They love you and they support you and they want to be there to celebrate with you. And them running around and handling issues doesn't allow them to do that, and doesn't allow them to be the emotional support that you need. Because as excited as you are to get married, it's an emotional day and it's a stressful day. Definitely. And you need people there who make you happy and support you and can keep you laughing and, you know, just make your day fun and enjoyable. And them running around and handling, you know, the wind blowing too heavy so all your centerpieces are falling over does not make your day more enjoyable for you. It might save you a little bit of money, but like I said, you know, nowadays you can generally always find a professional, a third party who offers a coordination service to fit your budget, no matter what that is.
Awesome.
Yeah. So in terms of biggest stressors, I know you mentioned that a minute ago as well. There's so many, and it really varies based on the situation, what is going to stress someone the most. What I hear a lot is just general confusion. There's a lot of information on the internet. Clearly, there are a lot of wedding blogs, a lot of wedding publications, a lot of vendors publishing information on their website. So there's a lot of information out there. And that, again, can be a good thing and a bad thing. So you may read something on one site that is true to that vendor's specific area of knowledge. And with the, you know, how wonderful the internet is, this vendor could be writing from the perspective of weddings in Seattle, Washington. and you're in Miami, Florida, and they're two very, very different markets. So a lot of the stressors that I hear from couples is just this overwhelm of information and not knowing what information is true or pertinent to them and relative to their situation. So sometimes the vast knowledge that you can find online creates more stress than it does good because you sort of don't know what's right. So that is one thing I hear a lot. That's how a lot of people end up finding me, is they're looking for something that's a little bit more personalized to them. So I think I actually skipped over this in the introduction. So I'll backtrack a little bit in terms of what virtual planning is. So
Sure.
essentially, what virtual planning is I act as a consultant. So we work together from whatever point you hire me to the point that your coordinator takes over, which I stated before is about 4 to 6 weeks. And we work together to find the right vendors that fit you, that fit your personality, fit your budget, fit your requirements, and fit what you're looking for. So we're working to find those vendors together. And we're also helping you review your contracts and make sure you aren't missing any sort of key details and that you aren't like overlooking, important things. One thing I read a lot is, it's been 2 months since my wedding and I haven't gotten my pictures back yet. Chances are that is outlined in your contract. And a lot of people, I'm guilty of it too. I do it more times than I like to admit in my personal life, but I'll get a contract and just sign it and move on. And I don't really actually know what it says.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've been
Yes.
there too. And when you're getting all of these contracts and all of these proposals, it's easy to just read over details. So that's one of the things that we handle for our clients as well, is reading over their contracts in detail, highlighting the important notes, the things they're going to come back and question 6 months down the line, making sure that they're aware of them up front. Because a lot of times those can be pretty major factors in making your vendor decisions. Those details in terms of picture turnaround and late fees and cancellations and all of those things. So on top of that, we also serve as a general resource. So like I was mentioning, you have this vast knowledge that is the internet. And while that's incredibly helpful, it's not personalized to you and your situation. So that's something that we also handle, is then curating responses for you. You have us unlimited via text, via email, via video call, via phone call, whatever it is, for whatever you need at any time. So, I get texts at all hours of the day saying, hey, I have no idea how to write my wedding program. Okay, cool. Send it over to me. I'll write it real quick and just shoot it back to you. Or
Awesome resource.
yeah, so it's really personalizing that planning experience. And because it's all virtual, it allows us to give that customized experience like you would get with a full service planner, but at a lower price point. And we're able to customize those packages to make it affordable for everybody. So no one has to feel lost and stressed and overwhelmed throughout the whole experience.
And I think another great point is that it's in almost like real time. Like it's almost kind of like an on-demand service where you're not having to set up an appointment with a traditional wedding planner or an event planner and visit them in their office or work around your schedule and their schedule. It's on your time around your schedule, meaning the bride's schedule, and you're there kind of on demand or on call almost.
Absolutely. And we do schedule, 3 to 4 calls throughout our entire working relationship that are a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth, but we are always available at any time via text is the quickest way to get me, of course, via email too, but you can just send me a text to come straight to my phone. And then I can give you a quick response. Or if it's something that needs a little bit more detailed response, then I'm there to say, hey, you know what? This is going to take me about 15 minutes to really get you the information that you need. Give me a second and I'll get back to you. So you know that you're getting the response, because that's the beauty of it, is we know your wedding, the ins and out. We know your family dynamics. We know your stressors. We know what you're looking for in your overall vision and what you've imagined for the day. So each response is customized to meet your specific wedding. It's not an endless Google search for, how much money should I spend on catering? Okay, well, that decision, that budget point varies significantly. So it's that's one of the hardest questions to answer.
Yeah. And I think another stressor that I've just seen in our group is people aren't sure how much they should be paying for a specific vendor, like a photographer or maybe a videographer. And do you help, do you find that too in your business? And do you do you vet the vendors a little bit first?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do when we first start working together is either if someone's come to me and they're a couple months into planning or 6 months into planning, whatever it is, and they already have a budget, then we do a budget review, sort of review what they've spent, what vendors they still have to hire, and where they are sort of in their budget. If they're in the beginning stages of planning, then we will actually develop and allocate their budget together. And that's something that we'll work on, as a group to make sure that it's right for them. But that's a huge stressor for people, because the thing with budgets and how much, I do see that a lot in the group too, is how much is appropriate to spend for a caterer? How much is this a good price if I'm getting X, Y, and Z from this type of vendor? Exactly. And it's a hard question to answer, because the answer varies so much based on, where you are in the country, that vendor's experience level, what you're getting in additional to the hours of coverage, what additional items is there an engagement session? Do you get print rights, copyright? Do they include an album? All of these things obviously factor into the cost. The major influence to a lot of cost being where you're located in the country. And you can't just assume that because you're in New York City, everything's going to be more expensive. So it's actually pretty ironic what I've found in my years, and I've planned a couple weddings in the city for clients, and photography, surprisingly, in the New York City area and its surrounding areas is actually cheaper than I have found in other areas of the country, because there are so many photographers that they have to be competitive in their pricing.
Interesting.
Whereas catering, I'm pretty sure all of my New York weddings, their catering budgets were more than my own wedding's total budget.
I believe that.
But there's things you have to consider based on that area. So in New York City, for catering specifically, they have to have special permits to drive their trucks and park their catering trucks.
Wow. Did I know that?
Yep. They have to, especially if they aren't located within the city, if they're located outside of the city, they have to get special one-day permits to operate and do business within the city. So there's all of these different regulations and different permits they have to get. And that can also vary based on the day of the week, what other events are going on in the city, what street they're on, if it's a busier street or not. So there's all of these factors that influence the cost based on where you are, which is why it becomes so hard to answer that question as to, what should I spend on this? Or what's the appropriate amount to spend on this? Because the other thing you have to consider too is it worth it to me? Is it worth it to me to spend $5,000 on catering? And it may not be. And so you may have to find another solution. Even if that's a reasonable cost, if it's not worth it to you, you're going to regret it and spend the whole time wishing you did something else too, which is another big part of the budget conversation.
A couple more things before, because I know we're coming up actually on half an hour, believe it or not. I don't want to keep you too long, and I know. Thank you again for volunteering your time to come on and talk.
I can talk weddings all night, so
awesome. We'll have you back.
Perfect.
So I have a couple more questions that came to mind as you were talking. Is How do you decide, I guess, I don't know if you hear a lot of this, but like what time of year to have your wedding? Like, how do you pick the date? When's do you think about, weather? Would you have a plan A and a plan B if you're going to do an outside ceremony? And how kind of the whole date decision comes into play, because I know people actually struggle with that and how it impacts, because some people want an outdoor wedding. And we just had a post tonight that said, I'm struggling with finding a date. I live in Texas and there's not a lot of good weather days to be outside, with the heat and humidity in Texas. So just wondering if you hear a lot of that in your business and what guidance you give to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in Florida, I totally understand the heat and
humidity.
There you go. I'm right there with you. And unfortunately, when it comes to southern states and wanting to get married outside, you pick the lesser of two evils and you suck it up. Because when it's not hot and humid, it's too cold for our, southern blood. So in terms of date, it really is. It's one of those things that seems so simple at the offset, but can really, when you start factoring things in, can become a long, drawn-out process and a little bit more complicated to pick your date. So I always suggest starting with imagining the type of wedding you want. If you know you want an outdoor wedding, then start with looking at the most enjoyable seasons to be outdoors in your area. And chances are that's probably going to be the peak season in your area. So I'm going to use Florida, for example, and really sort of the primary of the Southeast, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, South Carolina, Mississippi, all of that. Our prime wedding season is actually the opposite of what a lot of people know to be wedding season. So, you grow up hearing that wedding season is the summer. And in the South, it's actually the opposite. It's spring. It's mid to late spring, and then mid fall to like mid winter, because we still keep pretty warm winters until about mid January. So those become the prime seasons down here. So I always start with thinking about the type of wedding you want to have. And if you want it to be indoors, obviously your calendar opens up for the whole year. If you want it to be outside, look at when the most enjoyable times to be outside are. And then from there, factor in any dates that you know are already going to be conflicts. So if you have events on your calendar already, block them off. And then talk to your important family members as well. When you're in that date blocking off phase, call up your parents or your grandparents, your potential bridal party, and say, listen, this is the time of year we're thinking. You don't have to get specific about date, but just this is the time of year we're thinking. Do you have any conflicts that would prohibit you from being available at any point during the season?
I think that's a great point, because you might not be, for instance, I'm not Jewish, but both, one of my bridesmaids is a practicing, practices, and she's, we had an October wedding, and I knew there were a lot of Jewish holidays in October, and I was like, I better find out, because I know I want to be respectful of her and her family, and I wanted them to be at the wedding, obviously, but I didn't want to choose a Jewish holiday or weekend that was a Jewish holiday. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have had, people before pick a date, book a date, and never think to even ask their parents if they're available. And then come to find out their parents have a vacation booked that's been booked for a year. I mean, so it can, it goes back to those important people. If you book without checking with them first, it can actually cost you money in the long run. Right. They had to end up actually switching venues and lose a deposit because they didn't check their date.
It is a problem.
Exactly. So once you check with friends and, the important friends and then your family members about if they have any conflicts, then, it really at that point can just be as simple when you've narrowed it down to a season and you've got the dates within that season that don't work. go to find some venues and say, we're looking at the spring. A venue doesn't necessarily, if you don't have a specific date that you want, you don't have to have one to go and look at venues. You can let the venue then determine your date.
That's actually what we did. Believe it or not, we knew where we wanted to get married. We knew about the time of year. We had like a month or two range. We went to the venue and we said, in this range, what do you have available? And that's kind of how we determined our date, because we knew this season, but we knew that it was a very popular venue, and that we might have to compromise a little bit and go when they were available.
Absolutely. And that happened, when my husband and I got married as well, we actually had a specific date in mind. Our 5-year dating anniversary fell on a Saturday the year we had planned to get married. And we actually we knew a season. We knew we wanted to get married outside. Well, I should say I knew we wanted to get married outside. And just based on the time of year we got engaged and knowing what we had on the calendar for the months to come, I knew spring was going to be too early. So we got engaged in July, and I knew, okay, I'm in the wedding industry. I know the fall is going to be really busy for me. That's not going to leave me a ton of time to plan. Plus spring is a really busy wedding season as well. And just knowing everything that we had on our calendar, I knew spring was going to be too soon, which then took us to fall of the following year, which then we were like, oh, hey, our dating anniversary falls on a Saturday the next fall. How perfect. So we actually had a pretty specific date once we, worked through that process. When, couldn't find a venue we liked, finally found a venue. They actually had that date was already booked. And they said, we've got the Saturday on either side. It's your choice. So then from there, we sort of went back to, not the beginning, but then went back to that, okay, call the family and friends stage. Before we pay a deposit, before we book, these are our 2 dates in consideration now that we found our venue. Is there one that works better for you versus the other?
Perfect.
And then and then from there sort of weighed their opinions because we didn't have a preference and booked, chose our dates, based on the venue's availability and then what worked better for our friends and our family. So the process varies for every person. Again, all of you out there watching, I'm sure this is the answer you hate hearing, but so much of wedding planning really varies based on your own personal experiences. In your own, your own taste, your own likes and your situation, everything like that. So, it's always good to start with, if you know the type of wedding you want to have, if you want it to be indoor or outdoor, start there. Then go to calling friends and family, searching for venues, and then letting the venue from there determine the date.
Perfect. Good. Great. That's awesome tips. Great advice.
Yeah. And if you get to a point where the venue has an open calendar and you have an open calendar, then close your eyes and point to one. And I've had people do that before, it's whatever works. I will say though, if you are in that situation, always give yourself at least 6 months to plan.
You read my mind because you were touching upon that. And, I gave myself just about, not quite a year we did. And I thought it was perfect. I liked having the extra time. I thought it was just almost exactly a year actually. And I thought it was just the perfect amount of time to plan a nice wedding and not feel stressed and not feel pressured. So is that what you normally see? Is it, because I've seen actually recently people doing quicker weddings, and I'm actually surprised that they could pull it off, but kudos to them. I don't know if I could do it.
Exactly. So I, up until this year, always said that the average engagement was 12 to 18 months. I suggest if you have the time, I think a 12-month engagement is perfect. When you have a longer engagement, when you hit that 18 to 24 month range, you will have a lot of downtime where you'll sort of feel useless and like, what should I be doing with myself? Or you might start, as bad as it sounds, like over analyzing the decisions you've already made, because you might book some vendors. You might be able to book some vendors early on, but then you're sitting there with nothing to do and you're excited and you want to keep planning and you want to keep doing things. So then you start looking at more things online and then start second guessing, oh, well, should I have, gone with a shrimp and grits bar over, a plated shrimp scampi dinner? I'm making things up here.
Right.
Then you might start second guessing your decisions. So I think a 12-month is perfect because it sort of keeps you moving along and without having to feel too overwhelmed and stressed, like you said, like you don't have too much on your plate at one time.
Right.
I have started to see more engagements in that, 6 to 9 month range.
Yeah, I have too.
Which works. And, they're doing it. And I will just say this, like, you can get it done. And in all honesty, you could plan a wedding in a week. I mean,
oh, wow.
Other than the fact that you don't have time to send out your invitations and, order a dress, you're totally going to have to go off the rack, whatever it is they have. Right. Probably can't make alterations. Besides all of those things, you could plan a wedding in a week. So it can be done and people do it all the time. I just will say that there's a lot more on your plate at one given time when you're planning in that shorter time frame. So if you've got a hectic job, if you travel a lot for work, if you have kids already, then I would maybe suggest erring towards the side of caution and going with a 12-month engagement versus a shorter engagement, because you'll thank yourself later.
Perfect. Are there any last minute tips or anything that you see currently in your industry that you want to touch upon? And then if anyone has any questions, just pop them up in the comments, and then we'll probably say goodnight. And I'll post this to the group and you can add all your links. But if I didn't hit upon something that you wanted to talk about, please feel free to do it now. And then, as I said, we'll close for the night. If anyone has any questions, because I see there are a couple people still watching, if anyone watching live would like to ask Sarah a question, she is here live with us. So she's a great resource for everyone. She is if you just joined us, she's a professional wedding event planner. She's been doing this for, over 7 or 8 years. She has her own business. Yeah. She has a long history and experience in the industry, but she's had her own business, the I Do List, for about 7 years, right?
I've had my business for 2 years now.
Okay.
But I've been in the industry for about 7 years. Yeah.
Gotcha. So she's going to take your questions live if you have any right now, and just kind of close a little bit. And again, just Sarah, if you want to hit upon anything that I missed that you'd like to talk about and share with our group, you have the floor.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, so we'll wrap it up for tonight. Just one last thing that I did want to touch on. We talked a little bit tonight, Jennifer, about stressors and, the big stressors that I see. And I think I mentioned that, again, the stress points are going to vary based on everybody and your situation and your family dynamics and all of those types of things. But regardless of what is stressing you, if you are feeling overwhelmed at any point with wedding planning, if something's going wrong or not like you imagined, then don't be afraid to just stop, to just hit the pause button, to just take a step back and, sort of reset. Don't try and power through those stressful moments. Don't try and solve the problem. Let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling right then. If a bridesmaid has backed out, if you're having trouble with your mom or your future in-laws or whatever it might be, let yourself feel whatever you're feeling in that moment. Then go do something that makes you happy, that you enjoy, whether that's, binge watching Netflix and having a glass of wine or going to the gym or whatever it is. Go do something that puts you in a positive mindset and that makes you happy. And then come back to whatever it is that was bothering you before, because trying to handle the stressful moments, the stressful situations when you're overwhelmed and all you want to do is just get it done, is going to leave you making decisions that you probably regret in the end. So don't be afraid to just pause and tell whoever it is that's causing you headache that you need a minute, and just come back when you're ready, whenever that is. If it's an hour, if it's 6 hours, if it's 24 hours, it doesn't matter. Like, whatever's stressing you, don't be afraid to just walk away for a minute. So
that's great advice. So maybe, don't shoot from the hip and make a decision right when in the heat of the moment, especially, if you're having a trouble with, bridesmaid or, in-laws, maybe, kind of take a step back. I think that's great advice.
Absolutely. And even when you're, overwhelmed with the vendor, choosing vendors and making decisions for vendors.
Sure.
I know I get that way where someone says something, it pisses you off, it rubs you the wrong way, and you just want to fire back. Yep. And that doesn't solve anything in the long run.
Good point. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I'm going to, we've actually been going for over 40 minutes now. So hopefully people got a lot out of this. Oh, actually now a question just popped up. So I will read it off to you. Somebody says, I'm having my wedding in the fall of 2019. Would a Sunday wedding not be the best idea?
I think Sunday weddings are perfectly acceptable. I think the only time you want to really think about it is if the majority of your guests are from out of town and will have trouble taking a day off of work, which they probably have to take a day off of work for a Saturday wedding too, to travel on a Friday. So I don't see any issue with a Sunday wedding. There are a couple things that vary that may alter in your planning experience in terms of timeline, and how late you want to go and those types of things. But I think Sunday weddings are great. People do them all the time, and they are just as fun and just as exciting as a Saturday wedding. So I think, Friday, Saturday, Sunday
wedding.
Huh?
We had a Sunday wedding.
Yeah. So there you go. And I'm sure it was perfect.
Kevin and I did. It was great. And we started at 4. So we started, maybe a little bit earlier, but not even, not too early. It still gave me plenty of time to get ready. I didn't have to get up at the crack of dawn and rush getting ready or anything like that. It was very, it was a very relaxing day, actually. We weren't rushed, and everybody probably did leave a little bit earlier, but I was exhausted by 10 o'clock. So, after being, up all day and, just the adrenaline and everything. So I think everybody left by 10, but I mean, that's still a reasonable amount of time, 4 to 10. I mean, that's still.
Absolutely. We say average reception is 5 to 6 hours is where I suggest capping it at 6 hours anyways. We got married on a Saturday and had a 4 o'clock ceremony as well. And I ended the reception at 9. I think the only difference between a Saturday and a Sunday wedding for us would have been, we wouldn't have had an after party. So that was our thing. We wanted to end it at 9. And based on our venue, when we had to be out of the venue as well, is something you'll want to consider when you're thinking about when to shut down your reception. We had to be completely off. They told us we had to be off site by 10. We knew we had a little bit of leeway there.
Right.
But really about 10:30. So we really, had to end it at 9. It was sort of our only option, but we chose a venue in a great spot that was close to restaurants and bars, so we could just walk across the street. It was right next to the hotel. There wasn't an issue. But I think, to your point, you had a Sunday wedding. I think Sunday weddings are great. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Sunday wedding. People are going to have just as much fun as they do on a Saturday.
And to the commenter as well, I can't see names, unfortunately, but whoever asked that question, we actually had a fall Sunday wedding as well.
There you go.
And we chose, and I don't know if the poster can do this or not, but we chose a holiday weekend. So it was actually Columbus weekend. So many people had Monday off. Not everybody, but like teachers and, government workers. Yeah. Bankers. Exactly. Had that Monday off. So it, gave a little bit of flexibility to them. And I didn't get complaints, and everybody had a lovely time. And I think the key is, not starting maybe too late, and looking at your venue, like you said. I mean, a lot of them will cap you at 5 to 6 hours anyway. So, that still gives people, hopefully, a reasonable amount of time if they're local to, to get home and if they have to go to work the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I will say about Sunday weddings is if you do have out of town guests, then they are, especially if they're within driving distance, you will probably see a higher decline rate with a Sunday wedding. If you've got people who are 2 or 3 hours away that could drive in the morning of your wedding,
right?
They won't drive home the night of your wedding. So that's where you may see a little bit higher decline if you've got someone within 2 to 3 hours that can drive in the day of. Having that day on the back end is always nice for them to then drive home. So on a Sunday wedding, they obviously would have to take a day off, but right. Or at least take a half day, wake up, drive home, go into work at 11 or something like that. But so that's the only scenario in which you might see a little bit more of a decline, or a higher decline rate, I should say. But other than that, I think Sunday weddings are great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I know all the ladies in the group appreciate it. So I'm going to post, as soon as I sign off here, I'm going to post this to the group. I'll tag you in it so you can see it as well. And please feel free to enter all of your contact information, how people can get in touch with you, and feel free to maybe list a little bit about yourself in the comments and what your services are.
Absolutely. It was great talking with you guys, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Awesome. Have a great night.
Thanks, you too.